Hey, shalom, shalom to all my fellow brothers and sisters out there. It's me again, Damian Power from YeshuaSavesAll.com. Peace be to you in the name of our Father, Yahweh, and our Adon, which means Master in Hebrew, the Son of Yahweh, Yeshua HaMashiach. So, today, my fellow brothers and sisters, we're going to be talking about my testimony. Um, it's just a lot to cover, so I'm going to try to condense it the best way that I can, but when I was about 11 or 12 years old, I remember my parents used to watch the Ten Commandments movie. I'm pretty sure everybody's familiar with that Ten Commandments movie that I'm referring to. But one particular night, my parents were watching around that same age, Jesus of Nazareth, the 1978 version starring Robert Powell. Just happens to have the same last name as myself, right? So anyway, I didn't know that as a child when I was watching the movie, but anyway, as I was watching the movie, they came to the scene where they were beating on him and then they crucified him, and I could not understand why they were treating him that way, and I cried like a baby. I cried so hard. I mean, I'm talking about bawling out in tears. So after the movie was over, I went to sleep, and I looked into the corner of my room that night, and there was a white figure in the corner of my room. I'll never forget it, right? So, me being a child, I could not figure out how somebody got into my room. So, I covered my head with the blanket, and when I took the blanket back off of my head, the figure was gone. So, I knew that something was different, but in a good way. Because literally, I just finished crying for Yeshua, then all of a sudden, a white figure appears in my room. But like I said, I knew that things were different, but I just didn't know what at the time. As I got older, I would see more um, of why that happened. But um, even as a child, I would sit in my room and think about how the earth came to be. You know, thoughts like that, like how did these things come to be? You know, um, and I even started to write a children's Bible as a child. I never finished it. I started writing a children's Bible, and I remember my grandma used to make comments on it. You know, it just seemed like the right thing to do, but I never finished it because of course, I've never finished reading the entire scriptures at that time as a child. But I would see my mom and dad reading it, my grandma was reading it, so it really inspired me, and it was felt like something that I had to do as a child. But anyway, the point is that um, I always knew who Elohim was. I just never knew how to express it into words as a child. I remember whenever a thunderstorm would come around, you know, that my parents would cut off the TV, they would cut off all the lights, and we would all sit in one room, and we would see the lightning flashing. We would hear the loud booms of the thunder, and my parents would say, Elohim, or at that time they were saying Lord, is doing his work. And I was just so amazed at how powerful our Creator was. My parents taught me that reverence of Elohim as a child, like even whether they know it or not, even down to that respect of him working while a thunderstorm. I was just so in awe. When I hear boom, hear that loud thunder, I'm like, wow, you know. So anyway, in elementary school and middle school, I was a nerd, okay, and I loved to read, I loved to write. I stayed on honor roll, but of course I was mocked. I got joked on by the popular, as they say, the popular crowd. And eventually I began to fall away from my academic ways, wanting to fit in with the crowd and to become cool. It almost reminds you of Yisrael, where they were called to be a holy people unto Yahweh, but they self assimilated and always joined in with the pagan nations around them instead of being separate. Just to tell anybody, it is good to be different. It is good to be a nerd, a person who wants to read, because then you'll want to read the scriptures. It's a good thing. Please do not ever conform with this world. Okay. Now, even despite the fact of me wanting to become cool, Elohim never allowed me to go but so far. Okay. One example of this is when I was 16 years old, I began to work at King's Dominion, which is an amusement park. For anybody who doesn't know, um, but anyway, it was I worked at this place called Congo Funnel Cake at King's Dominion when I was 16. Um, and there were two employees there about my age that were working as cashiers. And they said to me, if anyone buys a funnel cake and a soda, it will come to $3.65. And if they give you the exact change, then do not ring it up in the register, right? Then you can take that money and put it into your pocket. And they showed me the amount of money that they made doing this scam. So shortly after they said those words, a man came to my window, and what does he do? He orders a funnel cake and a soda, and he gives me the exact change. So I did as my so-called friends told me, and I pocketed the money. Suddenly, I felt a tap on my left shoulder. So I turned and looked, and there was the manager. And she said to me, I saw what you did. Don't ever do that again. So as you can imagine, my heart dropped because I thought I was going to jail. Okay? I thought I was going to jail. I've never done things like this, you know. But the point is that I could never do what most people could do. And I never understood it as a child. An action like this could have led to a life of crime. Who knows, right? But it did not because I got chastised early by Elohim. It is amazing when you look back on your life and you see his fingerprints on your life, on your life the entire time. We just have to recognize that it's him and to give him all the praises for it. So I remember there was another time when I was a child, that my friends and I were throwing rocks at a new car, right? Which is not the right thing to do. We all went home, and a little while later, there was a knock at the door. It was the owner of the car, and they said that I was the one throwing rocks at the car, and the rest of the people who were with me got away with it. So I was the only one that got in trouble, and they did not. So as you can see, again, Elohim was saying, no, this is not the life for you to live a life of crime. Now, this is not to go against anybody who has ever gone to jail or anything like that. No, because our Elohim calls anybody out of the world. Paul persecuted the assembly of Yeshua from the way called the sect, and he was used to preach the gospel. So that has nothing to do with that. I'm just speaking about what he did for me in my life and my testimony. He didn't have any of these things in plan for me. So these are just two examples of what Elohim would always do. He punished me immediately. He punished me immediately for things that I would do that was outside of his will. So my fear of him began to grow as a child, and then again as a teenager, as I said, when I was 16. So I can honestly say that I couldn't figure it out as a child, but as I got older, I started to understand the scripture. Hebrews 12, Hebrews chapter 12, verse 7 through 8. If you endure discipline, Elohim is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom a father does not discipline? But if you are without discipline, of which all have become sharers, then you are illegitimate and not sons. That's powerful. I can honestly tell you, anyone who is listening, this is true. Do not despise the spankings that you get when you try to do something that's outside the will of Yahweh, because he is molding you into what he wants you to be. All right. So anyway, when college came around, I stepped out into the world even more, and I was still never wild, but I still stepped out into the world. And now, mind you, I just explained that I knew that Elohim was real, though I couldn't express it into words. He chastised me immediately, but like the influences of this world are powerful. And we have to come out of that, as you already know. If anybody's familiar with my channel, that's what I always talk about. We're supposed to die to self and die to sin and pick up our execution stake and follow Yeshua and live for him who died for us and rose again. It's not about any one of us. It's for living for him. But just like most of us who go off to college, I failed. Okay, so it's all a part of my testimony. I never, I never did drugs. I never smoked weed. I was never the type to really go to parties or clubs. I always felt out of place. But I did start drinking alcohol and I fell into fornication. Okay. My family, they they grew up Seventh-day Adventists until we switched to Judaism later on in my life, which I am no longer a part of as of almost 6.5 years. So I always knew about the Shabbat, the Sabbath day. Like I said before, we never turned on the TV, we never worked. But when I got older, I started doing things like going to the movies on FRIDAY with a lady, or going to a friend's house to play video games because I knew that I was not allowed at my parents' house. They kept the Shabbat. Now, looking back on my life, I truly see how Elohim is working in every aspect of my life. And I see his mercy for all the evil that I did in his presence, especially growing up with the foundation of the Shabbat. But I was breaking it because I wanted to do what I wanted to do. Now, when I started working at the sheriff's office in 2005, that is when things started to change for me. Okay. I went to college and I graduated with a marketing degree. So when I began working at the sheriff's office, I spent about 5 years on that job as the public information officer, which means I had my own office. I was working eight o'clock to 4:30 in the evening. I was the liaison between the sheriff and the media. I designed the brochures, the newsletters. I wrote the annual report. I took the pictures. I worked on the website and so much more, right? So in a way, I was getting able to use my marketing degree as working as the public information officer. Now, here's the problem, is that I trusted in man and it was fearful of what was going on around me. Now, what do I mean by that? By this, I mean that there were several transfer lists that would come out throughout the year, right? Which meant that people would be transferred from one position they liked to possibly working on the night shift in the back of the jail with the inmates. So if you can just imagine how that would be, you're working, 8 to 4:30 for 5 years, right? And then all of a sudden you get thrown to the back of the jail working midnights, right? So as you can see, a lot of people would be fearful of that. Like you're walking around on eggshells, right? So this was something that kept every employee walking around on eggshells, even if they made a mistake. Even if the employee made a mistake, that they would be stripped of their rank, they would be demoted, and they would be cast into the back of the jail to work. So the whole point was people wanted to work. They worked in the jail, and then they worked to get out of the jail to get into other positions of like maybe even going into a civilian position or driving around in a car doing civil process work, like for the courts and things of that nature. So it was a form of punishment to be thrown in the back of the jail. All right. Now, every time the transfer list would come out, I would get nervous and I would run to see if my name was on that list, and it never was. So after doing this and being nervous for 5 years, my worst fear became a reality because I was trusting in man. In 2010, I was approached by the undersheriff, who was second in command, and he said, being that the canteen officer quit, we're going to put you in the position in the jail for a few months until we find a replacement. And then we'll bring you back into the public information officer position. That few months that few months that he promised me turned into 9 years. So as you can see, it never happened. But this was all a part of Yeshua's plan. Although I could not see it in the beginning, I didn't know why I was going through this. I was terrified from going from the office position to suddenly being thrown in the back of the jail with inmates, especially with the mindset that I would never have to. But again, like I said, I was fearing man and I wasn't fearing Elohim. The inmates knew this. They knew I was a rookie. And they approached me saying things like, yeah, I'm going to beat you up. And they will call you outside of your name. And they will always look for a flaw to expose and embarrass you to make you fold and quit. It was just the nature of the job, you know? But it was brand new to me. Even though I had the training, I was like, I said, man, I don't have to ever go in the back of the jail. I had that mindset. But how could I have that mindset? But I was fearful that I would be thrown in the back of the jail. You see? So anyway, I want to be clear that not every inmate was that way at all. Okay. I just have to tell the truth of the experience, how I felt about it. I can't cut corners of it. I just have to be honest. I honestly did not know that people could be that disrespectful or cruel towards others. And I certainly did not know that people would have so much lack of respect for authority until I started working in the jail. I was like, whoa, it was a shock. It was a shock that I saw and experienced. But like I said, not everybody is that way, and it's just the nature of the job. You know, there were a lot of great people I run across, and I was never the type of person to treat any inmate like they were a criminal. I always personalized my experience with them. I called them by their name. I didn't call them inmate. I treated them like they were humans, and they always respected me for it. But like I said, the thing is in the beginning, I'm giving you the onset of what happened. Okay, so things got so bad, and when I was there in the beginning, that when I got off work, I would go home and figure out how to quit that job. I just had to figure out how to quit that job. I said, how can I get out of here? Okay, and when the alarm would go off in the morning, I would be upset because I loathed to go into that place. I said, here I have to go back and work in a jail that I never wanted to be a part of. Every time I thought I had the opening to quit that job to start another, it always would fall through. Okay, Yeshua quickly taught me that I had to lean and trust upon him. That's ultimately what this is all about. And after a few years, I went from being afraid to being bold. I went from being quiet to spreading the gospel to the inmates about 5 years later. Yeshua taught me how to trust him and not in man as I did in the beginning. That's what this whole thing was all about. And I eventually saw that Yeshua was sharpening me. He was strengthening me for the plans that he had for my life. Okay, if I could deal with being hated on that job by staff and inmates, that I would be able to handle persecution by sharing the truth of his word today. You see what I'm saying? Everything that he put into my path was to strengthen me to be a vessel for him to use. Whenever we go through a situation, my fellow brothers and sisters, it's for our good to be a complete vessel for him. So an example of me having a trust in Yeshua, I'm going to give you some examples, is one day I went inside of a day room, right? And the day room is where all the inmates are housed. And one day I went inside of a day room to go and speak to the inmate, right? And um, the door slammed shut behind me, right? Because this is more of the times when I started becoming more bold. And I went in to speak to an inmate about something that he asked me about, and the door shut behind me, right? And at this time when I was working in the jails, there were no cameras available. I know this is true because I worked in the control room. I worked in the control room where you're pushing all the buttons and you can see the cameras and everything like that. There were no cameras in the day rooms at that time. They came to be years later down the road towards the time that I was getting ready, when about the time that I quit. So the point that I'm making is this, is that there were no cameras available at that time. And none of the deputies were around to let me out. You had to have keys to open up a box on the outside of the room where the deputies would be and the inmates on the inside. So they had the keys. I'm in the room. How do I get out, right? So then suddenly I heard the door buzz and it supernaturally opened on its own. I heard zzz and the door opened. And I remember saying to myself at that time, I said, Yeshua is with me. Like it stuck with me for so long. I was like, how nobody could see me in here and the door open. And then another example is this is one day I was on the loading dock, right? And the loading dock is where all the truck deliveries would come in to deliver things to the jail, right? So I was letting a truck in, and suddenly the radio that I had died because there was a problem with our equipment during this time period, and we needed new batteries. And the batteries, like you would get a brand new battery, and it would ding, 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 it would die like as soon as you try to use it, right? So anyway, while I was out there, central control that controls the doors, like the cameras, they had cameras, like I said, like they weren't in certain locations, right? They weren't throughout the entire jail, but they were on places like the loading dock, right? But they opened a door that I didn't call for. And the door suddenly opened and my battery wasn't working, so I couldn't say, hey, central control, can you close the door? Suddenly, a deputy came by and he seemed concerned to help me out. He leaves and immediately a supervisor shows up and questions me about how the doors were open, right? And yes, it was a security risk, but it wasn't my fault. Is what I'm saying is that I couldn't control it because I didn't ask for the door, and my radio didn't work, so I couldn't tell him, hey, close the door. I didn't ask for that door. But anyway, a supervisor comes back there and questions me about this situation that was out of my control, and the supervisor takes me to the office and writes me up unjustly. Sadly, I heard that deputy that came to check on me, he was the one that reported me falsely. And I was amazed that he would do this to me. I was just amazed. I was like, how could people do someone that way, right? And then a week later, he got fired. And my heart was grieved for him losing his job. And the only reason why I'm telling this story is that Yeshua was showing me that I do not have to fight my own battles. Excuse me. Like I said, the whole point is that Yeshua was telling me, showing me the trust in him. My Father Yahweh and his son Yeshua were always there. You see what I'm saying? He's always working in your life even when you don't know it. So that's just one of the things I was just sharing about him building up my trust and my faith in him. We just have to see it. And I saw it immediately, and I said, okay, so these are stepping stones to my testimony. So, as I mentioned earlier, in 2015 was the beginning of me spreading the gospel. Yet, I was being a hypocrite. Yes, I was. Because I was with women, I was being involved with women outside of marriage. I had no clue what was about to happen to me, though. Wednesday. Yes, I spell out the names because those are names of pagan Roman deities. For anybody who's new to watching my channel, listen to this testimony. Those were my early days. I had to get up really early to get to work, and I would get off early. I had to be at work at 5 a.m., and I got off at 1 p.m. Though later on down the road, that changed. The 5 a.m. and me getting off at 1 p.m., the 1 p.m. changed to like 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. Okay, it changed, and I'll explain that later on. But originally, it was 1 p.m. So I had like a nice early day. So one day I left the jail. I left the jail that day, and I called my dad, and we went to lunch together. I'm still close to my family, right? And we finished eating, and we were walking to our cars, right? And we were walking to our cars, and we were outside and talking for a bit. And then my dad spoke, and I know it was the Ruach HaKodesh speaking through him. Now I know this, but at the time I didn't understand. But my dad said to me, concerning my fornicating ways, he said, you know what, son? You don't know what that's holding you back from. And then that's when it really hit me because I realized I was being a hypocrite. It really hit me hard. But of course, I did not stop immediately because I was having too much fun, right? Oh, going out there looking for those girls, right? Well, it's a big mess. However, those words really stuck with me. So a few months later, I visited a female. I left her house around 3 a.m. and suddenly I did not feel so good about my actions anymore. And I said to myself, I said, what is the point of all of this? And that night, I vowed to give my life to Yeshua and stop living in sin. And I never would have known that that was the point that he was leading me to, because once I vowed to give my life to Yahweh and to live for his son Yeshua completely, is when he began to speak to me. That's when he began to speak to me. And this was in 2005. So in the summer of 2015, I was leaving this grocery store that's called Martin's, right? It's no longer called Martin's anymore because they changed it to Publix. But when I was leaving the Martin's, this man stopped me as I was leaving the store. He was really dark skinned, but he had bright blue eyes. And he was shorter than me. And he said to me, "You are special, man." And I was like, by the time I digested what he said, I turned around and he was gone. And I kept asking myself, I said, what does he mean by that? And why did he stop me of all people? I wasn't the only one. And suddenly I started to remember the white figure that I saw in my room that night when I was about 12 years old, 11 or 12, when I cried like a baby after watching Yeshua of Nazareth. That I wasn't, I was different, and I never knew why. Okay, none of us can control, when our Father Yahweh and His Son Yeshua calls us out of the world. But all growing up throughout my entire life, I felt different. I'm just being honest. I always felt like I wasn't supposed to be here. Whenever somebody wanted to go out to the clubs and stuff like that, I would force myself to go. And whenever I went, I felt uneasy. I could never step out and be completely wild. Though I did sin tremendously, as all of us have been like sheep and gone astray, I could never go but so far. Like I said, I never smoked weed. I never did drugs. I could never do any of those things, even when the peer pressure was on. I said, y'all can call me what you want, but I'm just not going to do that. So anyway, still in 2015, OCT, the month 2015, one night I prayed and I said, JESUS, son of God, I trust you. And I did not get a response that night. When we were going to the synagogue, I learned the son's name was Yeshua, right? But I was still saying JESUS because I was still unlearning the traditions of men, right? So I knew who Yeshua was, but I was still saying JUSUS. I didn't completely make that conversion, you know? And just like when we're going to the synagogues, they call our Father Adonai, which means my master, and they never called him Yahweh. So I didn't know the name Yahweh until he revealed that to me several times that summer. Everywhere I turned, I saw YHWH on social media, in books. I heard it through people. And yes, I was on this dating website, and I saw this this girl that I was attracted to on there, and I know why that is because I kept looking at her. I said, "Man, she's attractive." And her subtitle was "Let YHWH be magnified." I said, "Who is YHWH?" And then one day I went looking for her to messenger her, and she was gone. So it was completely for me to see. He revealed to me what his name was. And I remember I ran to my brother and said, "Cliff," I said, "God has a name." And he was like, "What is it?" I said, "His name is Yahweh," right? I mean, it's so beautiful how he led me to it, right? But the very next night would be the change forever because I would call on the name of our Father Yahweh and His Son Yeshua, and I never interchanged the names again after this, okay? I never interchanged the names again once I found out. But this is what happened. The next day, I felt led to pray the same prayer, but using the names that I know the Ruach HaKodesh speaking to me at that time, which I'm sure of now. And when I prayed the next day, I said, Yeshua, Son of Yahweh, I trust you. And that night, I had a supernatural experience. I was laying in the bed, and suddenly I was awakened out of my sleep, and I felt a power rush through me that I could not control my movements. The presence took my right hand and placed it on top of the lamp that was next to my bed, and laid it on and placed my hand softly on top of the lamp. And immediately I said to myself, I said, Yeshua is the light of the world. And I cried. If you could experience that experience, I cried. I knew he was real. Like I said, I always knew he was real. I knew he was there. But this type of experience is unexplainable, a supernatural encounter. An encounter like this changes your life forever. So you go from believing in him to thirsting for him and wanting to completely live for him. It was just truly amazing experience. And I remember I was driving to work the next day, and I was listening to Paul Wilbur's song, The Watchman, when he sings in the chorus, when you lift up your voices and call Elohim, he will come. Now, mind my voice, because I'm not a singer, but I was singing right along with him, right? And then I began to weep so much while I was driving that I could barely see, because literally the lyrics that I just sang from Paul Will was that when you lift up your voice and call Elohim, he will come. And it reminded me the previous night that I called upon the name of Yahweh and Yeshua, and he revealed himself to me. I've had many of supernatural experiences, and I had one recently in MRCH of this year, 2021, while recording live on Periscope before it closed. And I was told by viewers that they could see incense in my room. But the thing is, I don't burn incense, and I don't even have a candle in my room. So prayerfully, I'll upload that clip for everybody to see soon. And it's only 52 seconds long of when it occurred. But the point that I'm making is that he's been showing himself to me several times. Though I've never seen, like people hear him audibly and things like that, but he does speak. And the point that I'm making is that he's here. And this is why I live my life the way I do, and why I plead with so many people concerning so many things. Because I know what's at the end of the tunnel. We either live eternally with him, or you live eternally separated from him. You want to be with him. So then, in NOV of 2015, I had a very vivid vision. Okay, so I had a supernatural experience, and then the next month I had a vision that I'll never forget. I was walking down a path, and there were thousands of people behind me, and I could not see their faces. And I kept going until it came to a dead end, which I believe was when I was walking in Judaism and its traditions. I believe that's what that dead end was. And I was telling people when I was working in the jail, Judaism traditions, because that's what I knew. I believe that that's that dead end. So in the dream, in the vision, after we came to the dead end, I looked and I saw another path. And I walked on that path, and the people were still following me. The path led out to an open field, and there was a house out in the middle of nowhere. There was a house out in the middle of nowhere. But I saw that a window was open. So I approached the window and I looked in, but I did not see anyone. And then suddenly this man approached and said, "Enter in, all of you saints." And I was so relieved, and I went through the window. And then four more that were behind me entered in through the window. And then the man's face got really angry, and he slammed the window shut on the rest of those who were trying to enter in through the window. And I will never forget the fierce anger that I saw in his eyes as he slammed the window shut, because once he did, I woke up. And my first thought was, What is a saint? We often use words in our daily life without knowing what they actually mean. For example, you will look at somebody and say, you ain't no saint. But we know how to always attribute that to being something good or holy, right? But we don't know the actual definition of a saint. So when I woke up, I immediately looked up the word. And it says, one who has given his life to the one true Elohim and believes in his son, because that's what I was striving for. At this time, when I vowed to give my life to Yeshua, I was seeking him. I was thirsting for him. And I said, wow, I've given my life to the one true Elohim, and I do believe in his son. And then the other definition was a person a person acknowledged as holy or virtuous and typically regarded as being in heaven after death. And we know that Revelation 14:12 says this. This is the definition of a saint. Here are the endurance of the saints. Here are those guarding the commandments of Yahweh and belief in Yeshua. So like I said, when I gave my life to him, when I was still working at the jail, I was telling people these things after that. And when I would stop being a hypocrite, that we have to keep the commandments and believe in his son Yeshua. This is what I was striving for. And the vision correlated right along with it. And it was another moment of weeping for me. I said, what is this about? I was just truly amazed. And I knew that Yeshua was calling me completely out of the world to serve him. And like I said, it tied in perfectly because, like I said, I had given up my fornicating ways that summer. And that's when he began to speak to me. That's when he began to speak to me. And to purge things out of my life. And I started living for him. And of course, there are still things that he has to get you to a point he has to get you to read his word and get a deeper understanding of his word. But I was striving to get there. And then that dream came. I tell you, it's so emotional. Oh, it's an experience that I'm telling you I'll never forget. And to this day, I still continue to learn and grow as we all do because I want to be found worthy to stand before the Bane of Adam, the Son of Man. This walk is never over until it's over. And I immediately began to seek his face even more and he started to purge Judaism out of my life and all those other things like I was saying because I was striving for the truth. However, it took me 4 years to actually commit to serve him full time. Like I said, I was striving to serve him, but I'm talking about full time. Okay. And I felt that he was telling me to do it, and I was afraid to. I was still working at the sheriff's office, but I was still writing. I was still reading. I was still preaching the gospel at the jail. And I would come home and do live Periscope live streams when I got home. But things on the job began to worsen. And I felt that it was happening to force me out of my comfort zone to leave. My 8-hour position turned into a 13 to 16-hour position 5 days a week, on top of being drafted once or twice a month on the weekend, which included night shift. I still refused to work on the Shabbat because like I said, I was all in at this point. So I ended up working night shift after the sunset when the Shabbat was completely over with, or on SUNDAY during the day, and then had to go right back to work the very next day, working brutal hours for another 5 days straight. So I was tired. I was exhausted. One day, I was tested by Elohim to see what I would do and if I would completely walk with him or not, because we know that even in Exodus 16, Yahweh says, when he was talking about the manna, that he would test the children of Israel to see if they would walk in his Torah or not. He told them to gather it 6 days, but there would be none on the seventh. They went out there, they gathered on the seventh day, which is the Shabbat, and found none. Yahweh was testing them. Yahweh always tests us. He wants to refine us as gold in the fire. Okay, this is what it's all about. What it is all about. Okay, now a mandate went out through the entire jail, telling all the employees that there was going to be a mandatory draft list that included working on the Shabbat, due to the fact that the jail was short-staffed. And I told them, I said, I will not work on the Shabbat, but I will work any other day that you need me, as I just explained. Once the sun sets, on once the sun sets on Shabbat, it's the start of the next day. It's the first day of the week. So I said, I can work when the sun sets after Shabbat is over with, or on SUNDAY. So the sergeants and the captains got involved, and eventually I got called into the major's office. And he and the captain told me that it was necessary that I had to work on the Shabbat or risk being fired. I told them that I would not work on the Shabbat for them or the president. And a comment was made by one of them, that one of the judges that worked in the courthouse was a Jew, and that he works on the Shabbat if there's a court case. And what I mean is FRIDAY night, right? That's the start of the Shabbat. So if a court case would run over on the start of the Shabbat, that the judge would stay over until the court case is over with. So if the judge could do it being a Jew, how come you can't? And I said, I'm not him, and I'm going to serve Yahweh fully and obey his commands. Everything that I've shared about how Yeshua was molding me to die to self and live for him was for moments like these. Is that I will stand up no matter what and trust him. I did not get fired, and Elohim blessed me for standing for him. And the letter that I wrote became what's the word that I'm looking for here? It became the foundation for other people that would come if they had any issues concerning religious purposes. I can't think of the word right now what I want to say, but the letter that I wrote became the standard. All right, so that's another thing, is that our Elohim is always molding us to be what he wants us to be, so that we will stand no matter what and won't fall into fearing man. And I remember that I told you that was my problem. I feared man, but I no longer did. That's why I'm tying all this in. I no longer feared man. I would stand for Yahweh, his son Yeshua, and be led by the Ruach HaKodesh. That's the way I'm living my life. As everybody knows that's watched this channel, you can watch all my videos. That's what I talk about. But he was leading me up to that point. So I began to pray to Elohim if he wanted me to stay at that job or to leave, to serve him full time. And every time I asked him, he responded to me immediately. But I pulled a Gideon. Remember, Gideon said, Yahweh, if it is you, let the dew be on the fleece and not the ground. It happened. Then Gideon said to let the dew be on the ground and not the fleece, and that happened too, right? We want to be sure, but I don't know how much more sure I needed to be, because he answered me every time. And let me give you some examples. I had several confirmations, but I was scared to leave because I have bills, right? I still have mortgage to pay to this very day, right? But Yahweh is faithful. Yahweh is faithful, and he does provide. But I was scared to leave at that moment. So my faith was strong, but at that point, it wasn't strong enough. Though I wanted to be clear that we cannot do anything on our own strength. We need the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. So in 2016, I prayed and I asked Elohim if he wanted me to quit. And on my way to work, there was heavy traffic. There was heavy traffic on the way to work, and I ended up getting rear-ended. So the police got involved, and I was out of work for about 5 hours as the whole situation with the police was getting taken care of, right? So that should have been my first indicator that he answered my prayers and said, I don't want you to go back there. Because I immediately got into a car accident, right? And it wasn't my fault, by the way, because like I said, I got rear-ended. And when I got to work, everybody asked me, said, what are you doing here? Did you just get into a car accident? But me, I'm a loyal person, and I didn't want to let anybody down. So I went to work anyway, right? Now, let's fast forward to 2018. The summer of 2018, I prayed to Yahweh if he wanted me to stay or leave the job. And immediately I ended up with the flu. And I was out of work for 2 weeks. Then I prayed again. I prayed again, and I ended up with a serious sinus infection, was out of work for another week. Okay? Now, this is significant because The point that I'm making is I always went to work, and I always went to work on time. The job could rely on me, whether I didn't want to be there at that job or not. I was always loyal, and I went to work. So the point that I'm making is that when I left the job, when I finally did, I ended up leaving with 1,100 hours of sick leave, though I didn't get paid for any of that. You have to retire in order to get that old to get paid for your sick leave. So I left with 1,100 hours still on the book that I could not even use. The point that I'm making is that I got the flu and got a sinus infection. So when I prayed if you wanted me to leave or not, something would happen to me to prevent me from going to work, though I was loyal to keep going. You see what I'm saying? So he was answering me. Then comes the big one in OCT, the 15th of 2018. We had just finished celebrating Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, a few days earlier, when we are required to live outside for 7 days in booths as he commands, right? As Yahweh commands. So I went back to work and I saw things on the job had gotten worse. But the thing is that everybody said that when I was gone, that things were running smoothly. But when I came back, things got worse. And like I said, I truly believe that this is because he was forcing me out. He said, I don't want you here. I have other things for you to do. I want you to serve me completely, full time. So when I went back, it reminded me of the misery I felt on the job and began to think about the peace and connection I felt with Elohim during Sukkot, being connected with him, being outside in nature, dwelling with tents. It's just this feeling that overwhelms you. And I said, this is what I need to be. But I went to work, and when I did, it reminded me, I said, what am I doing here? So that night I prayed, and when I got home, when I got home from work, I said, Father Yahweh, in Yeshua's name, I see that you want me to quit. So do you want me to walk out, or do you want me to put in a notice? That very night, I had a vivid dream of me driving to work, but I forgot my uniform and equipment. I forgot my uniform and equipment, right? So that's the first indicator. Then that same dream, the scene switched. And I was driving my car and it completely died on me so that I could no longer drive it. So I ended up walking home in my dream. Now, mind you, the very next morning when I woke up, it was the 16th of OCT of 2018. I got on the highway to go to work, and again, there was heavy traffic, just like it was when I prayed in 2016 if he wanted me to leave when I got rear-ended the first time. So it was deja vu. So I merged onto the off-ramp, and I was on the off-ramp, like right there at the edge of it, not completely on because there was heavy traffic, right? So when I merged onto the off-ramp, I looked into my mirror, the rear view of my mirror, and I'll never forget, I saw a van coming at me full speed. He was coming full speed. I knew there was nothing that I could do. He hit me so hard that the car flew 3 lanes across traffic without me getting hit by another car. That was all by Elohim's will and mercy. Because another car could have came from the middle lane or the further lane or even from the lane closest to me and could have smacked me, and who knows what would have happened. But he hit me so hard that I flew across 3 lanes of traffic. And I couldn't stop the car. I couldn't stop the car because the brakes weren't working. That's how hard he hit me. The brakes did not even work. And when the car, I didn't know how far the car was going to go. I was like, man, I was like, what am I going to run into? So eventually the car stopped. And I got out, I looked at the car and saw that the rear end of the car was completely smashed. The windows were blown out. The car was totaled. Then I realized the dream that I had the night before was a prophecy. Remember I said that the car stopped, that I had to walk home? That was a prophecy that the car would be totaled. And remember I told you that in that dream that I started driving to work, but I forgot my uniform and my equipment. That's another indicator that it was time for me to leave. This car accident kept me out of work from OCT the 16th into NOV the next month to the 12th, right? At this point, it was clear for me, but I still went back to work hard-headed. And the final confirmation happened a few months later. I went in that morning and I felt like I should not have been there, as I already knew this. So I prayed for the final time. And I asked yet again to leave. This is the mercy of our Elohim. This is his mercy. And when I got inside of the jail, no, I already knew this, so I prayed for the final time and I asked if I should leave, right? And when I got inside of the jail, literally 10 minutes after I finished praying, an inmate approached me from the special housing unit. And these are the inmates that everybody thought was crazy. Okay, so now you can get the picture of what I'm about to say. And this inmate from the special housing unit, these guys that have who are going through mental, they have they're going through mental problems, right? He came to me and he said, "Powell, just do it." And I said, "Do what?" And he said, "You already know. Just do it." And I said to myself, there is no way that he would have known my situation. There is no way he would have known that I just prayed 10 minutes, literally 10 minutes ago before I came into the jail. So I knew that Yeshua was speaking through him to deliver the message to me and to answer me yet again. Like I said, it was always immediate responses concerning me leaving. So I was excited and I knew what I had to do. Even though I knew what I had to do, that all those other times where he kept responding to me immediately, I kept pulling that Gideon. And this one was final for me. I remember my mom asking me, and she wanted to know, she said, "What are you going to do?" And I told her, I said, "I'm going to quit, because I feel like if I ask Elohim again, then I will get hit by an 18-wheeler and I will not get another chance, because my life will be taken for me being disobedient." So in June of 2019, I quit the job. And I've been working for Yeshua ever since. Am I still learning? Absolutely, but this is what it's all about. I tell this whole testimony to show that things were always different for me when I was growing up. I never felt like I was a part of the world. I never felt like I wanted to, even though I wanted to be, he never let me go but so far. The situation at the jail was all of his way of showing me that I'm here for you, son. And you have to trust in me. You have to rely on me, and I want you to serve me. This is what I want you to do. And that's why I gave this entire testimony, to show everybody that his mercy endures forever. He is here for us, and we've all strayed and sinned against a holy Elohim, right? But we can always repent and come back to him, and he wants to fill us with his Ruach HaKodesh, his Holy Spirit, so that we will completely do exactly what he requires. So, my fellow brothers and sisters, I pray that this has encouraged you. And if you feel that the Ruach HaKodesh is speaking to you today, and you are delaying in your life, and you are delaying to give your life to him, and you are, as Yeshua talked about, one of the parable of the sower, where you hear the word of Yahweh, but the words of this life and the deceit of riches choke out that seed so that it does not bear fruit. Do not be that one, because I could have been one of those, where I was worried about the things of this world. I was worried about paying bills. Even though I still have bills to this day, I was worried about that. But we know that Yeshua says, "Seek first the reign of Elohim and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." So you can't let the seed fall on thorn bushes and get choked out by the words of this world and the deceit of riches. You have to give your life to him, especially if you feel him calling you out of this world to serve him. Do it. He had mercy upon me to finally get there. And like I said, all of the everything that led up to this point, even me from being a child crying when I saw the movie, JUS of Nazareth, to me seeing a white figure in my room, to everything that I've said to this point of me working in the jail, has got me to where I am today. Everything is on his time. Everything is on his accord. Only he can take the spiritual blindness off your eyes. And here I am today. So that's all that I have to share today, my fellow brothers and sisters. I thank you all for joining in. And may our Father Yahweh bless you all in Yeshua's name. Amen.